Welcome to the episode 37, and today I am talking to Ali Murphy, an award-winning voice actor, ex-flight attendant, and the host of the Red Eye podcast, telling the extraordinary true stories of flight attendants and their passengers. Hi, Ali. I'm so excited to have you, and welcome to the Screw Being Unhappy podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So I was when I saw you first, and I learned that you were ex-flight attendant. You're starting your own podcast. The first thing I thought of was, of course, my fear of flying. But as we chatted, I learned the reason why you started your podcast and why you find it so important to share the stories of flight attendants and passengers. So, could you tell me and our listeners a bit more about yourself and what is your story?
Yeah, of course. I was an actor when I was a kid and sort of did stage and Shakespeare and a bit of TV and things. And then I took a break for many reasons for 14 years. And in that time, I flew around the world as a flight attendant internationally, which was amazing. And then I've come back to the performing world in 2016. So for the last 8 years, I've been a voice actor and occasionally been on screen as well. But yeah, so it's been a bit of a journey, and throughout that life, it's given me a lot of stories to tell, which is why I've started my own podcast now.
Okay, and what I found so fascinating was that randomness of people we can run into on the planes. And I believe, if I remember well, that was one of the reasons why you started the Red Eye podcast. So can you tell us a bit of background for your podcast?
Yeah, of course. I started the thinking about the podcast last year. I was writing down the stories that I have of my time as a flight attendant just for my son, because I thought he's not going to believe some of the things that I have done in my short-ish life. So I started writing them down and I realized these are so fun, and I started appreciating little things like if I hadn't been on that trip, then I wouldn't have met this person, and then I wouldn't be where I am today. There's that, they call it the sliding doors moment. There's so many times, and the more I think about it, the more I tell stories, I realize, oh my goodness, if I hadn't got on that flight that day, I wouldn't have made this friend who influenced me in this way. And it was something that always excited me when I was a flight attendant. Every time I would wake up for a flight, I mean, most of the time I was like, oh, I'm tired and I don't want to go to work. But a lot of the time I was like, who am I going to meet today? Who's going to be the pilots? Who's going to be the cabin crew? Who's going to be sat at the bar all flight long telling me their life story? Is it going to be somebody famous? Is it going to be somebody who's lived a really long life and just likes to have a chat and tells me all these tales? And that's what I used to get excited for. Obviously, seeing the world is incredible, but I found if I stepped outside of my door and just started chatting to people, I would meet somebody that would inspire me or trigger a thought process or lead me on a path that I wouldn't have necessarily had if I hadn't had just left my front door.
Yeah, I love it as well. And it was actually, as I mentioned, I hate flying slash I'm scared of flying. And this was one of the reframes I used, like, oh, maybe I need to see the positive side. Maybe I meet somebody super interesting. Maybe something happens. It changed my life. I'm curious, and I didn't plan this, so hopefully I'm not kind of surprising you too much. But since we are talking about these stories, I think it would be amazing if you told us one now.
Oh my gosh, one of my stories. Okay, I'll tell you. This is a very personal story. So this happened to me, and it completely changed my life. So about 10 years ago, I was due to get married. Not to the man I'm married to now. I was a perfectly nice man. It wasn't the wild romance that I'd always dreamed of, but it was a story that I just kind of got to the point where I didn't think I was going to find. I had a fantasy, and I didn't think I was going to get my fantasy dream life. And I had a perfectly nice man who wanted to marry me. So I thought, just do it. I'm in my 30s. I should just do it. So we agreed to marry, and he was very much a homebody, didn't like going out very much, liked to do the same sort of things every weekend. And that made him very happy. And that's not a bad thing, because I know there's plenty of people in the world that stay in one place and have the most incredibly happy, content lives. They've got friends and family all around them. So it's not a judgment against that. But for me, I was always felt like I was just slightly settling, just being slightly disappointed, thinking, oh, I remember when I was a kid, I thought this was what my life was going to be, and it never quite turned out like that. Anyway, I was a flight attendant, and I was flying to Vancouver for the first time. And I was excited because I love going to new destinations. So I said to my fiance, come with me. It's a 2-night trip over a weekend. Why don't you come with me? And he was like, oh, no, I want to play football with my friends on Saturday. And no, I don't really want to. So I kind of was okay, never mind. I took my mum with me instead, and me and mum went out and we explored Vancouver. It was pouring down with rain the whole time, but we had a great time. We wandered around, and on the last day, I said, "Let's go up the mountain. We never go up mountains. Let's just take the car up the mountain, and it would be fun." So we went up the mountain, and there was a lumberjack show happening at the top of this mountain. I thought, that'd be fun, Mum. Let's go watch the lumberjack show. So we sat there watching it. And it was funny, and these guys were credible, just throwing axes and climbing trees really fast and doing all sorts of crazy stuff, rolling on logs. And there was one of the lumberjacks who clearly, like, about 10 years younger than me. But I looked at him, and at that exact moment, he was just doing up his shoe. I looked at him, he looked at me, and I swear, Susanna, the world stopped turning. Everything went quiet. I was in a moment, in a bubble. And it was in that exact moment that my entire life changed. Now, he wasn't the typical guy that I'd go for. He was far too young for me. And it wasn't like I was sitting there thinking, well, now I have to leave my fiance and go run after a lumberjack. It made me realize that if I was 3 months before my wedding day, starstruck by a young man, then I wasn't in the right relationship. And I kind of climbed back down the mountain and said to my mum, I just don't know if this is the right thing, and I'm feeling really strange. And we talked, and I went home, and I said to my fiance then, I don't know if I can do this. And it was horrible. It was a horrific time. I ended up going back to Vancouver a week later. Again, I hadn't swapped onto or anything. I just had another Vancouver really randomly. And I met up with this lumberjack. I met up with this lumberjack. And it was like he reminded me, of course, we're not together or anything. When we were completely inappropriate for each other, but he completely reminded me that there was romance that I wanted, and that there was passion that I wanted, and there was excitement in my life that I wanted. And so I went home and I broke up with my fiance. And I had a pretty miserable year after that, because there's a lot of, self doubt and, self hatred. I didn't really like myself because I thought I've broken the heart of this lovely man, for what? And I was alone and felt very sad and down. But it changed my path. And a year after that happened, I was walking home one time feeling very sad about myself, and it was my birthday. Nobody had turned up to my party, and I'd been drinking a lot. So I was walking home, and I came across a man lying in the middle of the road, an elderly man, and he was unconscious and he'd collapsed in the road. So I'm first aid trained with being a flight attendant, so I called for help, got someone to stop the traffic, assessed him, and kept him. He was started to wake up, so I was talking to him, assessing him for injuries, and just basically talked to him until the ambulance came and took him off to hospital. And I went home, had a really hard cry and a big self-pity party for myself, and then I said, "That's enough. I'm not doing this anymore." And I sat and I wrote all the things that I wanted from my life. I wrote them down, pen to paper, and slowly they started happening. A week later, I met my now husband, who was the top 3 things on my list. I wanted a creative, kind, ambitious man. That's the 3 things that my husband is. And I met him a week after I'd written this list. And now I'm an award-winning voice actor. I live in the United States. My life is full of adventure, and I have wonderful conversations with people every day because I get out and talk to people. So yeah, that's kind of one of the things that happened for me. It's not really a massive story, girl meets boy, girl decides doesn't want to like boy anymore and then goes off. But actually, if I hadn't started seeing other places and having other views, maybe I wouldn't, maybe I'd be unhappily married, or maybe I'd be divorced. You just don't know where my life would have been. And I find that exciting. There's so much power in that. There's so much control in that. You have control over your life. Our life is incredibly beautiful, but it is so short. We've just got to make the most of every opportunity that we have.
It's amazing. As I said, I didn't plan to ask you for the story, and I'm so glad you did. And now I know why you have a podcast telling stories. I had goosebumps as you were talking, it really, I was like, is the lumberjack, is that the husband? I didn't know. Like, so I already felt like, what is the possible ending? And it reminded me a bit of my story, because I was in very similar spot to what you were describing with your ex-fiance. Only I didn't have the courage to say no before the wedding. So I actually got
Mm,
married, even if I didn't want to. And even though you said it was so hard for you, but I guess we all have different stories, right? So
yeah.
if maybe if I would do it differently, I would also like end up in completely different spot. And that's what I love about like what you are sharing, what you share just now with us, and what you are sharing in your podcast. It's this complete randomness, like what happened to us and
Mm.
take us somewhere. And we don't see it at the moment, right? Like when you mentioned you had a pity party for yourself, or when you broke up with your fiance 3 months before the wedding, you probably didn't see it that way. But now when we look back, that's when we are able to connect the dots.
Yeah, absolutely. And the same for you. Like if maybe you had said no before the wedding day, you probably wouldn't be where you are today. You wouldn't have met the people that you are with today because you would have taken you on a different path. So sometimes we have to view the things that happen in our lives, the good and the bad, as positive in a way, because whatever it is, it takes us where we're supposed to be. And
Yeah.
a lot of the times we wish we didn't have to do it. But I fully believe that if you can find some positivity in it, it just leads to a nicer life overall. Sitting and feeling awful about the things that have happened to you only does yourself a disservice. So if you can find any way to find a little bit of light in some of the things that happen to you, whether that's because it leads you to go on and help others, or it leads you to meet people who are in your circle now. It's good for the mental health to find a little bit of light in whatever we've been through.
Yeah, 100% agree. And I tell that to myself as well, to my clients. And probably there is no way how to find out what would happen if something else. But we have this choice of deciding to believe that it will lead to something positive or to some opportunity later on, or we can believe it sucks and our life sucks. And we have no
Yeah,
way which one will be true, but we can choose that one, which one makes us feel better. And that's the first one, right? So like
yeah, absolutely.
100%, like for this first option, like believing that this is happening for some reason. And even if it's not true, it's making me feel better and it's making me show up in better way.
Yeah, because to be honest, for the sort of 15 years preceding that event, I had a very victim mindset.
Hmm.
Or I would always say, "Oh, well, these things always happen to me. Oh, if it's going to happen, it'll happen to me." I think it's one of the reasons why I think I have so many stories of my time as a flight attendant is because if somebody was going to get sick or die on my plane, it was going to happen to me. If there was going to be some sort of emergency, oh, it would happen to me. I feel like I brought a lot of stuff on myself because I was always saying that. I'd say my name's Murphy and it's Murphy's Law that if it's going to happen, it'll happen to me. And I would also say horrible things about myself, about as an actor, I would say, oh, well, I used to be an actor, but I was terrible. And that's why I'm here now. And oh, yeah, I wasn't any good, was I? Because otherwise I'd be successful. So all of that stuff, because I said I wasn't successful, guess what? I wasn't successful. And because I said I was terrible, or because I said things always happen to me, guess what? Things started happening to me. But the minute I switched that mindset and just thought, no, I can make something of this. And in fact, I went to therapy after I left my fiance, and my therapist said to me, the problem is, Ali, you are a fantasist. And I thought, yeah, I am. Yeah, that's okay. Like I'm a fantasist, as in, why would I not want the best for my little life that I have here? Why would I not want to take every opportunity to find happiness? Why would I stay being miserable because it wasn't the least miserable I could be? That doesn't make sense. This was a therapist telling me this. I didn't
Hmm.
see much of her after that. But she said it in such a bad way. Oh, the trouble is you're a fantasist. And I thought, yes, I am a fantasist. And you know what? I'm going to spend every moment of my life trying to make my life the fantasy that I had when I was a little girl. Because, gosh, if we don't do it, when do we do it? We'll just end up on our last days with regrets. I don't want that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love it. And sorry about the therapist who got fired after that, but like
Yeah,
it's
well,
amazing.
maybe she
Like,
learnt.
yeah, I fired one of my doctors before going to Africa after she told me that if I die, it's my fault. So we all have this kind of experiences.
Wow.
Um,
Gosh, let's just hope they're having a bad day.
yeah. So, Ali, should we intentionally include randomness in our life? And if your answer is yes, how should we go about it? Do we have to fly or do we have other ways how to do this?
I would say with randomness, I would see it more as seeing the opportunity. And
Mm-hmm.
if it's something that makes your heart feel good, makes your gut feel good, then go with it. I mean, I personally would never jump out of an aeroplane. So if somebody said, "Hey, let's go skydiving today," I'd be like, "No, thanks, that's not for me," because that's personally I know I don't want to do that. That's not something that the thrill seeking. It's not for me. Although I do like a good zip line, but that I think that's different because you're really safe. But still, I think if there's an opportunity out there and you have to be open to it, in which case you have to have a positive mindset, because if you're feeling very negative, you won't see good in anything. But somebody says, "Hey, do you know what? There's a comedian playing in town tomorrow next week. Do you fancy going?" And you think, well, actually, I do like. I don't know why I never go to these things. Why don't I go? If you've got the opportunity and the means to do so, just take some. You never know who you're going to meet. You never know what story you're going to hear that's trigger off a thought process. So rather than randomness, as in just say yes to everything, be open to opportunity and daydream. That's the other thing I would really recommend. I daydream by writing things down now, and it's probably triggered from that very first moment where I wrote down everything I wanted and then seemingly got them. But I put pen to paper. There's a lot of power in putting pen to paper. And sometimes I just let my mind wander. And, or similarly, I'll go for a walk or I'll do something really dull, like I shampooed the carpet last week. And I shampooed the carpet for 2 hours. In that 2 hours, my mind wandered. And I thought about some things that actually, do you know what? I'd really fancy doing that. And I've started looking into them now. So I think it's more about, instead of being random, just be open and explore opportunities. If there's something you want to do, explore it. Meet people. It's definitely much more of an interesting life if you get out there and just experience things. So that it's not necessarily getting on a plane. If you don't want to get on a plane and it really will not cause you happiness, and I'm talking about in the long term as well. For us, I know we talked about you do still fly even though you're scared, because you know once you get there it's totally worth it. So you face your fear to do that, which is amazing. For me, I don't personally think I'll find any joy or achievement in jumping out of an airplane, so I'm not going to do that. So if there's something that you want to do that's within your means and within your passion, whatever your heart makes your heart sing, go out there and chat to
Mm.
people, talk to yourself, just explore. I think that's probably the best thing you can do. Explore, because you don't know what opportunity is going to come from that, that's going to bring you joy.
I love the distinction you made about between randomness without the kind of introspection and then being open to opportunities. I think it's yeah, it's I really like it because it's important to know our boundaries, like what we want to do and what we don't want to do. What, like, if somebody tells me, as you said, the skydiving, here we have the Victoria Falls in Zambia, and what is it famous for is also bungee jumping from the bridge between Zambia and Zimbabwe. It's like, there is no way I am ever going to do it. Though I have the crazy idea of that maybe one day I am going to become a pilot of Cessna to battle my fear of flying, but I am not there yet. But I really like this, like you said, oh, if it's a something like I'm open to, why should I say no? And I also experienced not on plane. I met a couple of interesting people on the plane, but like I had some meetings. I met so interesting person in the middle of the Gobi Desert in Mongolia, and that was what, 7 years ago. And I actually, just before our call, I was thinking I need to drop him an email how he's doing, and we stayed in touch. We met just that one time in Gobi. We have like 1 hour conversation, and even 7 years after, we are still in touch, and it was like so random.
I
Um,
love that. See that, and I think sometimes, do you ever meet people and you feel a connection to them, and it's not love, it's not I'm going to be with this person for the rest of my life. The only example I can think of is a pilot that I flew with a few times. We're the same age. He's an attractive man. I didn't feel any feelings of love towards him, but oh my gosh, I loved spending time with him, and we would go out and we'd do fun things. We'd go on adventures. We'd go see trees or climb mountains and things like that. He was a great friend. And I think there's certain people in your life that you'll meet, and maybe that's that guy in the Gobi Desert for you. You just meet and you think, I need to stay in touch with you because I don't know what it is, but we're connected in some way, and you have interesting conversations. And when you have conversations, you feel great afterwards. There's
yeah,
definitely people in our lives that do that to us, and I think they're the ones that you want to stay in touch with, because why not have people in your life that bring you joy? And it doesn't have to be
yeah,
have a label to it. It's just nice.
yeah. And how amazing, like just talking about this, like we are both smiling. Like I am feeling super
Yeah,
happy right now, even if I felt hectic and tired because it's 9 p.m. here, right? But just
yeah.
like bringing up this topic, it lights you up. Um, and that brings me to the next questions. What lights you and lifts you up when you feel like giving up?
That's a really interesting question, because as I'm in my 40s now, and I've started to become really aware of how I'm feeling, and also that I need to look after myself so that I can look after my son and, my husband and everything else in my life. So last week, for example, I was feeling great at the beginning of the week. My podcast had just launched. I had like 1,500 downloads. I was feeling great. Everything was going well. I had so many ideas in my head. I was bursting. I woke up on the Thursday morning and I said to my husband, I feel really delicate. I feel like I need to rest. And I did. I took the day. I lay on the couch with the blanket on and I took the day because I just thought, my body's telling me I need to rest right now, and I'll be back. So I think, one, listening to yourself and listening to your bodies, and taking care of yourself. But what gives me the most joy is when I'm excited about something, when I've got an idea and I feel motivated. That gives me a lot of joy. Being on set on a film, I can't tell you the buzz that gives me. I don't get to do it very often. I live in the Pacific Northwest, and there's not much getting filmed up here. So, but when I do get it, there's a buzz, and I think it's because everybody on that set is working towards one goal at the same time, and that's kind of magical. Like when it's bustle, 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 action, and it goes quiet, and everyone is working towards one goal to make something. So that's something else that gives me a buzz. So I guess what I'm saying is creating things gives me buzz and a meaning. I mean, I'm reasonably, I don't say a new mother. My son's nearly 5, and when I had him, I immediately sacrificed myself, which I think is a thing that most mothers can relate to. I didn't indulge myself in anything that I wanted because, especially for the first couple of years, I was like, well, I don't get to sleep because my son's not sleeping. So that's why, I don't need sleep because he's not sleeping and I need to look after him. I don't need to do the things I love because he needs me to be right here, right now, singing Twinkle, Twinkle or something. We sacrifice ourselves, I think, a lot as parents. Um, and I noticed the effect that had on me. I lost myself a little bit, and when this time last year started bringing myself back to life again, oh, the difference that I felt in my body, just the energy and the positivity and the motivation. So yeah,
Yeah.
and I mean I've said it many times, but yeah, meeting people and just chatting to people, I think that gives me so much energy because I think when you're talking and spitballing ideas with people, there's a motivation there, and it sparks stuff inside you, creativity, ideas, imagination, and there's something lovely about that.
Yeah. I was thinking, as you mentioned, Twinkle Twinkle, I was like how all of us have to suffer with Baby Shark songs, and like it's probably cemented in
Yeah.
our heads now. But I think my son is 4, so they're almost the same age.
Oh yeah,
And
they are. Yeah.
it's so much better as they like I can watch it like for myself. Like the first 3 years was really hard. Like he is not a
It
good
was.
sleeper, waking up at 2 a.m. wanting to play. And finally, when he hit like 3 or 3.5, that's when we start sleeping. And that's when I really also start focusing on like, what do I need? And I had a couple of therapy sessions, and then it was about something else initially, but it ended up in this topic, like that when we give ourselves away too much, we kind of, it doesn't work well for anybody. So
No.
I think
It's like they say on the airplanes, you put your own mask on before helping others. It's because if you're not okay, you can't help others. So it's the
yeah.
same in life, isn't it?
Yeah,
I wish
and
I
this is
wish
like
I'd
the
remembered
perfect
that.
episode with a former flight attendant to mention this like oxygen mask thing, which I hope that will never happen to me, that I will have to do it. But um, I'm curious because I want people, when they are listening to this podcast, I want them to go to action because I believe listening or reading, it can be inspiring, but the real change lies in action. So
Mhm.
if there is one thing you could ask the listeners to do just after
Mhm.
listening to this podcast, what that would be?
I would say find yourself half an hour, get a nice notebook and a nice pen that feels nice when you write, and just start writing. Even if it's, I don't know what to write right now, but my mind is saying maybe I should write about, oh, do you remember last week when I went to the thing? And just let your mind go. And or give yourself a goal to write about things. Sometimes I'll say, right, I want to write about what my perfect life is looking like, or what my perfect house is looking like, and write down every detail, what you can smell, what you can hear, what you can feel on your skin. Write down every detail, and just mull it over a little bit. I find so much um of my innovation comes from just mulling things over for a little bit. Or if you have a buddy that you can chat to. I have a couple of I call them accountability buddies, and we chat to each other every week, or we'll leave voice notes with each other every week. And we get so many ideas from each other just because we're talking and back and forth and it's open and you have to be honest, that's the rule. But if you don't have that person, do it to yourself. Just write down. It's so powerful putting pen to paper, writing out your dreams and just seeing what's in there and seeing what it triggers in your mind.
Yeah, I love it. If I would turn the camera, you would see how many notebooks I have there because I keep writing. I'm not really journaling, but just like making notes. So yeah, I, I am creating actually my own action points, and that's what listeners can also do, right? Like, what ideas did this conversation spark in you, or did you think of somebody? So you can go and journal and do what Ali
Yeah,
was saying, or if something else came up in your mind, like go and do it. Send the email
yeah.
to that person. I'm going to send the email to my friend from Gobi. And also, what I'm going to do, I might be flying in August to Czech Republic, and it's like 14 hours flight. So I was like, that I will be really thinking about you, Ali, and I'm like, who am I going to meet on this flight? Like, what's going to happen? So that's
Yeah.
my second action point, like from this conversation. So thank you so much for being here. It
It's my
was
pleasure.
absolute pleasure for me as well. So where we can find you and when we can hear more of your amazing stories.
So you can find me personally at Ali Murphy Voice on Instagram, TikTok, etc. And then for the podcast, it's called the Red Eye Pod. Well, the Red Eye Podcast, but the social media handles are at the Red Eye Pod on pretty much all social media and YouTube. So yeah, and you can find me wherever you listen to podcasts. I've got plenty of stories.
Yes. And everything will be in the show notes. So once again, Ali, it was wonderful conversation. Now I no, I don't want to say I'm looking forward to my flight, but it's at least a bit more positive outlook after hearing your
Exactly.
story. And like you are a wonderful storyteller. So thank you for sharing this with us. And it was my pleasure.
Thank you so much, Susanna.